This is Gemara and Sukkah Daf Chof Aleph. All the learning for this month, the month of Av, has been generously sponsored as a Chanishmes Ches Shagim and Avram Yehuda, as well Rechel Ba Shamshin Aaron Tzvi. As we embark in the second parak of Sukkah, the learning of the Torah Chabua should be a tremendous chos ilim nishmasam. Of course, our Chili Men Bavega Chaim Besar Shalom Sivin Eizos Ar Baskinant to Basim as Chaysay Yisrael Min Deleros President Shalei Shom Vazano Zmid Shom Vasfeg Shvi Basheva Fega Bashir Chana Shalom Atil Din Khanrizim Chaim Tzvi Librachim Tzav Musa Atinel Bashir Min Dasvim Fega Ron Nechlas Ben Asel Huva Revga was the Shavan After Svim Lester Besoy Shar Chali Yisrael, as well as the tremendous Shidduch right after we pass Tubav and Mirchem should be a schus for Shidduchim, Shochaim and Devayra, as well as Shir Miriam Bas Rezel Gittel. We pick it up in the bottom of Chafam and Beis. We began the Mishnah yesterday, the Mishnah that discussed sleeping underneath a sukkah. And before we get into the thick of actually sleeping underneath a sukkah, we're going to have to deal with a bit of a side issue. Is that yesterday we asked, how tall was this bed that you were sleeping of, that you're not yotzei, that the bed acts as a barrier between you and the schach? The Gemara answered it was 10 tfachim tall. Now the Gemara is going to embark on a bit of a side topic, a topic of oil, a topic of being a separation between you and the schach, which will touch upon being a separation in general in the dinim of oil. Let's see it together. We are on Chafam and Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, 2 lines into the Gemara, Tanan Hosam. We learned over there. Echad chor, whether you have a hole, shacharu mayim, the water chiseled out. Oy shratzim, or creepy crawlers chiseled out. Oy shachlu malachais, or it was eaten away by certain malachais, some corrosive materials. V'chein midvach avanim, a stack of stones. V'chein soyer shal kairis, or a stack of logs. Ma'il ala toma. The halacha is, any of these cases, even though the chiddush, the common thread being, they were not created by human beings, they're created by water, by animals. Still, the halacha is they create an oil, and anything underneath it will be makabel tuma from the mace within that area. Rav Yehuda Omer, no, kol oil shina asa b'dei adam einay oil. My time with Rav Yehuda, asked the Gemara. And before we see the reason Rav Yehuda, let's take a moment by seeing some beautiful pictures. First of all, these were all the pictures from yesterday. We didn't really spend time looking at them. These are the different types of mats. As you see over here, this is a bit of a smoother mat of gemi. This is the smoother mat of Shafi and Gami, and this was someone sleeping on their bed, which we'll come back in a few moments to discuss. Says the Gemara, if you have a hole that was chiseled out by the water, seeing so beautifully over here that the water, every time it crashes up against the rock and makes a hole over there, or maybe you have a hole that was made by some shrotzim, by some animals, or you have a midvach havanim, a stack of bricks with a tevach in between, or a sayrish al kairais, you have these logs with a tevach in between. Says the Gemara, in all these cases, if there is any sort of tumah inside, the tumah will spread throughout the whole area. You'll have a regular din of tamei oil. Says the Gemara, my time with Rav Yehuda, where did Rav Yehuda get this din from? The Rav Yehuda says that oil has to be made b'dei adam, and if the oil is not made b'dei adam, it's not b'kabel tumah. Says the Gemara, as we move over to Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, Rav Yehuda, you learned the oil mi mishkan. He learned it out from the word oil. The word oil is written by us. The word oil is written by mishkan. It says by us, person dies in the oil. Famous pasuk for all the Bali Musar. But with regard to Elchas Tumah V'Tayra as well, this is the Tayra of someone who dies in an oil, and that's the halacha. That's Tumah on the oil. It spreads throughout the whole oil. And it says by mishkan. The verse says oil ala mishkan. The same word oil malalan by the mishkan. B'dei adam. The mishkan was created by man. Avkan b'dei adam. And therefore, if the oil was created not by man, by water, by animals, by other natural occurrences, it says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda holds it's not a din of oil. A fascinating halacha. We have the water chiseled out, the massive hole, and what goes on inside is a corpse. Other items inside that hole will not be makabel tumah, says Rav Yehuda, which was not made b'dei adam. Ask the Gemara, Rav Yehuda, beautiful reason. Xeris Akasav. What do the Rabbanan do? Rabbanan oil, read, but the Rabbanan will learn. There's the actual oil written in the Torah, actual word oil. As the Tab Rashi points out, oil in Tuva Ksiva Barsha has many words oil, and therefore the excessive, the extra word oil will come to include, says the Rabbanan, even if it was not made by people. Says the Gemara, question of Rabbi Yehuda, 5 lines down. Is that true? Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that if an oil is not made by man, it doesn't have a din of an oil? For a minute, I'll ask you a steer, I'll ask you a contradiction. There were courtyards in Yerushalayim, a bit of a lengthy brayso, everyone pay attention. There was courtyards in Yerushalayim, al gabi hasela. There was built on top of a rock, and underneath the rock was a airspace. Then they cover at the in order to separate from the cover of the depth. So again, we have a rock that there were courtyards built on top of the rock. The rock was on top of a halal, of a airspace, in order to separate between that and the kever, the potential mace underneath it. So we have mace, we have hole, we have rock. we have chatzar. They bring to that chatzar whom Nashin Ivrais, women who are pregnant, the Yolda Sham, they would give birth specifically in that area. Umegadlis Beneam Sham Lepara, they would raise their children there. B'Taira, to work with the para aduma, because we know the para aduma cannot become tummy. And not only would they give birth in such a place to make sure the child, the fetus, the ubar, the newborn, would not be makabel tumah, not contract any tumah. They would bring their cows, para, shvarim oxen, valgabeim delasais, and on the oxen were these wooden boards on top of the oxen, vitinoikis, and the young children as they would grow up, yoishin al gabeim would sit on the oxen on top of these boards, v'koisei shalavim b'deim, and they would use cups of stone. Every item here is in order to make sure nothing is going to be makabel tumah. Higel shiluach, they reached the spring. Yardu, the child would go off the ox. You go into the water, and you fill up that stone cup with water, every item, every step here, in order to make sure there is no tama, no impurity, because we're dealing with the para aduma. Va'alu, the child would come up, v'yashvu lahem, and you go back into the ox, and that's how they would create almost a vacuum against tumah. Rav Yesi Aimer, he argued slightly. They wouldn't even get off the ox, he says. From on top of the ox, they would lower down this stone cup. When Malim they cover they would fill it up because they don't want when they get down, maybe they'll be over on top of a grave, on top of some sort of mace, and contract Tama. That is a brisa. V'tanya, we learned in a brisa. Again, we're driving to figure out the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said any oil that was not created by man does not have a din of an oil. So we're trying to figure out that opinion. We just quote a lengthy brisa about all the different steps they took to block Tama by the para aduma. Says the Gemara B'Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says Rabbi Yehuda Lo Mevi and Delasais. They wouldn't use doors at all. Why not? Ella Shvarim, the oxen themselves, they would ride upon. Asks the Gemara, 1 second. We're riding on oxen. Why are we riding on the ox? We're on the ox in order to block between the child and any potential tumah that the animal will walk over. Says the Gemara, an ox is a man-made item. Not man-made, excuse me, the opposite. The ox is not a man-made item. Vashvarim, these oxen, the oil she'ena also the adam, they're not created by man who, Vikatani, yeah, we learned Rav Yehuda. So we see seemingly that even though we're in a situation that the oil was not created by man, still Rav Yehuda's holding it has a din of oil, and therefore you can ride on top of the ox to block you from the tama. We just said a moment ago Rav Yehuda holds any oil that was not created by man does not have a din of an oil. But we see over here it does. We see the ox does. Answers the Gemara, Kiasar Avdimi, Amar Avalazar, Might Rav Yehuda, Kemali Agroif. That since it's the size of a Mali Agroif, Rav Yehuda would hold, that's the reason why it's different, that even though it's not created by man, it will have a din of Tama. When did Rav Yehuda say that if it's not made by man, it does not have a din of Ayel? If it's not a Mali Agroif, a fistful, but if it's a fistful size, then it does. Tanami Hachi says, Gemara, another Raya, Might Rav Yehuda, B'Shakiyim, Umenikiki Aslayim, these different types of racks. Why? Because they're Mali Agroif, they have that shear. Asks the Gemara, 1 second. So why? What did Rabbi Yehuda come along? He said, you don't have to put these doors, these wooden planks at the top of the ox. To ride on the ox itself. Ask the Gemara for Adelis Ishma Kama Agreifin. Adelis itself is the size of many hands. Vikutani, and yet it says, what's going on over here? Amar Abayi says, Abayi, you got it wrong. Rabbi Yehuda didn't say you're not allowed to bring doors. Amar Abayi, 4 lines to the bottom. You just meant you don't need the doors. It's okay with the animal itself, but if you never said it's not going to work with the doors. Rav Amar Tars number 2, they don't bring doors at all. You know why? When you're sitting on a door on top of an ox, kishmak, a wonderful ride. It's a beautiful limousine up there. And the kid might get too comfortable, and the kid might pop out, says the Gemara in the bottom line. Maybe the kid, he's enjoying such a comfortable ride. Excuse me, I flipped the wrong way. 1 more second. The kid is enjoying such a comfortable ride. The kid might go and lean over. And what happens when he leans over? He might get over a mace or something. So says Rava in explaining the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and they purposely didn't put the doors there for a tactical reason. They wanted the kid to be alert and vigilant at all times. So they had to ride on the ox itself in order to make sure they didn't leave over. B'kever time, and that's what the concern was. Therefore, we didn't put the doors over there. Says the Gemara, 2 terutzim in explaining why Rabbi Yehuda did not require the doors on the back of the ox. Abayi says, not that he said you can't use the doors, you didn't need the doors. Rava said that the reason is a technical reason. We don't want the kids to get too comfy up there, and perhaps lean over and become tamei. Says the Gemara on the top line of Chafal from base Tani Kabasi the Rava. I'll bring a right to the second answer to the opinion of Rava. Says the Brayser of Yudah Aimer Lemevi and says call Iker. You know why? Says the Brayser in the Shadai Shalinik Tinik Das Alav because the kid will come Hori Sham Yetzi Roisha Yechem Evar Vitam Bekever Time. Elo rather says the Brayser. Whoa, they do Mevi and Shvarim Amitzrim. They bring Egyptian oxen Shekrisas and Rachava, big fat oxen. But you know, because Yeshal Gabeim the Kushal Avim Biadeim, and they would have these wooden stones cups. He gave the Shiluach Yardum Alam Balu Yashul Lahen Al Gabeim. They got back up and they sat on the ox, and therefore says the Gemara we have an explicit Braysa concurring with the opinion of Rava that the reason why they didn't bring these wooden planks to make sure the kid's not too comfy, so the kid is alert, vigilant, and doesn't lean over and become tamei. Says the Gemara, great. Two explanations why Rav Yehuda did not require the door on top of the back of the oxen. We defended the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda, again, is the opinion that holds that an oil that is not created by man does not have a din of oil. Asks the Gemara now, but a bed. These were kamei groipen. A bed has many hands breadths. Utanan, and we learned in the Mishnah, Rav Yehuda Omer, no, they would sleep under the bed. Then they asked him, so what's going on? How do they sleep under the bed? The bed should be in oil. The bed should block them from the schach, and they should be in the rishos. They weren't yet to the mitzvah of sukkah. Says the Gemara, shiny mita bed's different. Similar to the concept we saw the past few days. What's a bed made for? A bed is made for lying upon, for the area on top of the bed, not for the area underneath the bed. And therefore, that's the reason why it will not be an oil, and lying under the bed, you'll still be Yitzir Mitzvah Sukkah. Ask the Gemara, Sharanami and the Gabbana Suyun, what do you mean? An ox is also made for the outside on top of it, and therefore why does it act as a barrier for the things underneath it? And explains the Gemara, no, says the Gemara, Shvarim are also used to block the things underneath it. Why? Because the shepherds on a hot sunny day, b'cham in the sun, ne'acham from the sun, and b'gsham ne'gishamim. A shepherd, a hot sunny day, where do you find some shade? You sit underneath your ox. A shepherd, it's on a day, and all of a sudden the skies open up. What do? You go under your ox. So you see the ox is also made to block underneath it, and that is the reason why it acts as an oil of the item underneath it. Says the Gemara, 1 second, based on the fact you're being a bit inventive, and going in and saying different svaras, why an item is used, the Achi will ask you a question. A bed as well, it's also used for underneath. What do you mean? You sleep on top of the bed. True, but you put your shoes, you put your sandals under the bed, and they're somehow shielding the bed. So maybe a bed as well should be made for that which is underneath it. And if it's made for something underneath it, it should act as an oil. And therefore, if you sleep underneath it, it should block you from being inside a sukkah. And you should not be Yitzir Mitzvah sukkah. So how did Rabbi Yehuda say you let us sleep underneath your bed? Elamar Rava explains, shiny shvarim oxen are different. It's not that we're being inventive, that there are random times that you use the items underneath it. No. Oxen are used in order to shield their own intestines. Shenamar, as we see in a pasuk, Aru Basar Tal Bishenu Basamas Gidin Tzacheni, the pasuk says that the ar and the gidin, the skin, is used to cover itself, and that's the reason. Meaning, the at time usage, the interval usage of an ox to sleep underneath it, to go underneath it from the sun or the rain, would not be enough. Similarly, by a bed, the fact you put your shoes underneath it is not enough. It's an ox is always used to guard its intestines underneath. Teres number 1. Teres number 2 says, Gemara, Rav Yehuda is going according to his reasoning that says, Sukkah diras kava bi'inon. This should sound very, very familiar. Rav Yehuda is going, we had this Gemara in Yuma. Sukkah is a diras kava. Rav Yehuda is of the opinion back in the first Mishnah that you're allowed to have a very tall sukkah. Favle mita diras harai. And what's about a temporary dwelling? The sukkah oil kava, and the sukkah is a permanent dwelling. And it's true, in this answer, it says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda could agree that a bed at some level is an oil. A bed at some level does shield underneath it, but it's only temporary. The sukkah is permanent. So the temporary nature of the bed cannot be mafkia, cannot exclude from the permanent nature of the sukkah, and therefore will not block you from being in the sukkah and will be considered as if you're sleeping in the sukkah. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Rav Shimon Damar Nami Sukkah's deer is kava binan. Rav Shimon holds sukkah is a permanent dwelling. And Rav Shimon's going to hold that the oil arai is going to be mevatel. The oil kava. Answers the Gemara, incorrect. This is the machlokes. That is going to be the machlokes. Rav Yehuda and Rav Shimon. So we're coming out with two fundamental answers according to the opinion of Rav Yehuda. We're agreeing that Rav Yehuda holds, like we started off today, that an oil, it's not made by the Adam, an oil made by God. It does not have a din of an oil. Yet we saw the oxen are different. Why? Because the oxen, that's why they didn't put the planks on top of it. Because the oxen are used to shield underneath it. But then we continued and we explained here in Amud Beis. So why did Rabbi Yehuda allow them to sleep underneath the sukkah? The reason being, says the Gemara, either because it's not really made for underneath it. That was one answer. But the oxen are made to shield its own intestines. The second answer, Rabbi Yehuda is coming along and saying a fundamental idea. Rabbi Yehuda is the opinion that says the sukkah is a dir askeva, a permanent dwelling, and the bed, which is a temporary dwelling, cannot exclude from the permanentness of the sukkah, and therefore that's the reason Rabbi Yehuda allows them to sleep underneath the sukkah. Says the Gemara, the two dots, almost in the middle, about 15 lines, 20 lines to the bottom. We concluded the Mishnah with Tavi, the famous servant of Rav Gamliel, that Tavi went and he slept underneath the bed, and Rav Gamliel said, look at my servant, so smart, such a Talmud Chacham. He knows that an Eved is potter from Sukkah. Says the Gemara, Tanya Rav Shimon Mishichasai Shel Rav Gamliel. From the casual conversation of Rav Gamliel, Lamanu, we learn Shnei Dvarim, two things. Lamanu, number one, Shavadim Turmina Sukkah, and Eved doesn't have to go into Sukkah. Like he said, V'lamanu number two, and only the servant slept underneath there. We also learned something else, says the Gemara. You know we can learn. Amar Ravacha Barada, Amar Rav Hamnuna, Amar Rav. You have to look into every part of a Talmud Chacham, even the casual words that come out of a Talmud Chacham's mouth. You have to even learn those words. Shenamar is from the pasuk of Aleo La'ibal. Nothing goes to waste. Every word that comes out of the mouth of Talmud Chacham, every utterance, every action, we have to study and learn like we see from Rav Gamliel. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, new Mishnah, Chavan Aleph Amabis. If you lean your sukkah on the bedpost, it's kosher. Then it's going to be psula. Let's see some absolutely beautiful pictures. First of all, this is the Kilkei Aslam and Shkifin from the previous Gemara, the size of a gripus of a hand's breadth. And here you go. You lean the schach directly on the bedpost. And now, this is going to be the picture that the Gemara is about to discuss. Let's see it inside. Says the Gemara, my time with Rav Yehuda, what is the reason Rav Yehuda says that it has to stand on its own? Again, in the Mishnah, Tanakama said, you're allowed to put your schach directly on the bedpost. Rav Yehuda says, no, only if it can stand on its own. Says the Gemara, what's going on over here? Where did Rav Yehuda get this? That it has to stand on its own without the bed? Why? Says the Gemara, Machlikish of Zion Rav Abba Bar Mamel. This is Rav Yehuda. It has to be keva. And if it's just supported by your bed, that's not keva, that's not permanent, so it's no good. You know why? Because if it's sitting on the bed is makabel tama. And even the support of the schach, a tremendous chiddush, says Rabbi Yehuda, the support cannot be something which is makabel tama. We know the schach can't be makabel tama. Now we're learning that even the support, the walls, cannot be makabel tama. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda says the walls have to be able to stand on their own. My benai, what's the afkamina? See these two answers. You put metal spits and you put schach on top of them on the metal spits. Similarly, this is where the sukkah comes from. Metal screws, metal walls. Parts of your sukkah, are they allowed to be makabel tama? Are you allowed to use metal in the walls? Maybe not. Says the Gemara, that's this discussion. If that's the reason Rabbi Yehuda, metal beams is great. The first white line, will be no good. Two different ways of explaining Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Abaye says, Abaye, 3 lines at the bottom. That they leaned it. My time, what's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda would agree in such a case? Because it's properly there. Because the reason let's finish by seeing some beautiful pictures. Here you see you put metal spits in the ground, you put schach on them, that will be the nafkamina between the two opinions. This is keva, so it would be kosher, but on the other hand, it's makabel tama, so it would be pasul. Says the Gemara, then it's going to be ksheira, and that is going to be because over here there is the permanent aspect, as well as it's not makabel tama, the reason being because it is separate poles, and Mir Tashem will pick up